Cool. So that's recording. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, guys. This is fairly informal, and to fill holes that I've identified, there's a few people that, while they've never done an assignment like in 20 years, and now they've got to suddenly do these assignments at postgraduate level and don't know what to do. So I've just put this together based on a few things I'll be doing with a few people, and it's designed to help address these things. If I don't cover anything that you want me to cover, let me know because I've got some questions at the end. So anyway, that's what's happening here. It's not working. Okay, so topics that I'll be covering today are pretty much what I put on the why and when do we reference. So just a few theories before we go into the practical side. The basics of citation, so in-text citations versus end-text referencing. There's a few differences there. Tools and tricks, paraphrasing information that you want to find. So we're actually going to do an example or an exercise paraphrase that I've put together. We're going to have a look at some examples of referencing from the APA 6th handbook, which is the current standard of that QAS is using. How to reference according to the APA 6th. How to drive the citation tools and words. Do some examples set up in Word. So I don't know if you've used Word, the referencing tools at all.
Really good.
Excellent. So if you know how to drive that, if you don't, we're going to today. I'll be using a Mac, and it's slightly different to the PC, but you'll be able to, once you know what you're looking for, you'll be able to find drive. So it's pretty cool. I have some open questions. I've put in here, there's no such thing as a stupid question because in a learning environment, you get something to ask. And that's how I learned, by asking all the questions that everyone knows. And we're going to answer an question. So what I've done is I've dragged out one of my previous assignments that I've done and researched it using pathway and referencing, and I've highlighted, got photos here to show exactly how I did it. And it's interesting because I actually agree with the answer now. I think it's could have done it better, but we can show you why. Time permitting. So this is supposed to be a 1 to 2 hour. Actually timed it, so we'll see how we go. So why do we reference? If you've heard, is been a massive buzz phrase since the late 90s, early 2000s called integrity, and it's exactly what it says. Basically, showing integrity with your studies and research, and focusing on that today with online degrees and credit where credit is due. If someone's done something and using the work, we want to show respect to them and let people know that that's where we got the ideas from. We need to also defend our own academic level. So you want to show where you got your argument from to support it. And one thing I've observed, people who do the copy and paste thing, they don't actually learn anything. They spend all these hours fulfilling requirements, but they walk away not knowing anything more than they actually knew. So you waste your time, you waste time because then you get picked up for plagiarism, and then you've got to resubmit, and then you get kicked out or whatever. It can go bad. There's this thing called Turnitin. A lot of people know about it. A lot of people haven't heard of it. An academic online assignment checker. So gone are the days of there used to be a website called ihateschool.com or something like that, where you would literally pick a topic and find an essay written and submit that. But now there's this thing called Turnitin is so sophisticated, and I'm about to show you a screenshot of what we can do, and it picks up anything that you've written and it detects it similarity with anything else that's out there. That's pretty it's pretty scary. But people will get caught. That's the bottom line. And if you don't have the site to support this similarity, then it's an example of where you something that you may not have been able to justify. So bottom line, plagiarism equals 7. You already knew that. Going to the first, so we can do show you why I've done what I've done in this session. So when do we reference? I'm going to sit down for this. When any idea that's not your own, that requires a source. Bottom line. Highly specific information or technical data. So obviously it's high level. You wouldn't have come up with that by yourself. It needs to be shown where it came from. Once again, it demonstrates academic integrity and responsibility. Responsibility for our ideas, where that came from. And it shows how research to support and can create a strong argument. Now, with this convince the reader part, I'll put that in because I did an assignment for my degree previously, and the feedback from my instructor was, excellent paper, well done. I don't exactly agree with you, but you've got enough support here for your argument. So well done. So I passed, and I convinced her that I had a strong argument, even though she didn't necessarily like the idea. It was supported, and so I passed with a good mark. So yeah, it's about backing up what you want to say with evidence. That's probably half the things that get passed through anything these days. Someone out there gets in their high horse, writes a paper, has all this evidence. Oh, it's evidence supported. Let's do it. And that's why we get forced to do all these changes sometimes. So yes, intelligent people reference, not because they're smart, but because they're smart about their writing. And ignorant people copy and paste and hope for the best because they have no idea what they're about to get caught up in if they don't do the right thing. And that's where the checkers come in. And this bottom line is probably the biggest one. I've done assignment writing in the past. Assignment marking in the past. And the same theme comes through and comes through and comes through. Obviously, you want the right response because that's part of the learning process. And you get this one or two, they write the same thing, but it's not referenced. So you can easily see that they've done the same work, but haven't included the citations and credit for where other people have done. So it's easily picked up anyway to a trained reader, let alone where that does checking. There's a lot of reasons to, just do the right thing, and it keeps you under the radar, as it were. So you may recognise this BMJ article. This is a screenshot, so I can't text through. But you can see this is what you see when writing a paper, maybe, hopefully not. Away we go, and everything's hunky-dory. This is what your assessor is doing. I don't know if it happens in our organisation, but when I've been doing this is what we actually mark through. So when we mark a paper, we actually load it in. So there's the name of the software. Here, 1 correlates to 1. Anti has got this internet source here, that line, verbatim. Number 8 here to this site here. 10 here correlates, it's off the screen. 1, 2, 4, 3, all these are independent websites that have correlating information verbatim that matches this assignment. So this is where citations are lacking. For example, number 1 here, I'll use it for the viewers who are on the line. This one here, this pink line, it's okay to have some matching text because somewhere in the world someone's going to, but if it's specific information that's been almost verbatimly copied, then you want to, or a whole chunk of idea, you want to, and obviously it's probably not your own, you want to be able to say, oh, this is where I got it from. Could you put some of that in inverted commas or whatever? Yeah, Yeah, see, this assignment would be completely fine if there were citations, but there's not one. So here we have a similarity of 65%. So what that means is 65% of this paper is identical to sources that are out there online. So it's a clear indicator where, and it's probably a fake assignment, Maureen's, but it's an indicator of one example where someone has sources, got their information, written an awesome paper, doesn't give him credit. So this person is guilty of plagiarism if it was a real assignment. So it's really important to give credit where credit's due. Otherwise, it can be rendered void, and that's what Zing is all about. So we're going to learn how to do it properly today. So in-text citations, what is one? Or do it. Detail. A lot of people get caught up with these little characters, punctuations, commas, colons, everything. It's about getting the right spacing, etc. And this when we use the software to do it, it spaces it out. But how do we know when we're doing it correctly if we decide to put a quick citation in? I've narrowed it down to 4 main types or formats of citation for in-text. So the first one is got the author and then the date in parentheses. So everything is relative here, but the citation is inside the period that closes. Here's the period. That's the end of the sentence. So the citation is actually in the sentence. So that's one. Second one, if you're referring directly to the author in the sentence, say, but 2018 asserts that everything is relative. So what you're saying is the author talking about them in the sentence directly, as opposed to using this author's idea and then giving them credit for it in the background. So the parentheses, anything inside parentheses, part of the assignment, but it's not part of what you're trying to say, but part of information behind what you're saying. So in the first one, everything is relative. It's credit to someone who said it in the past, so this is not your idea. But here, you're actually giving credit to say that the same point. Or you can just put in 2018, Hibbert stated that everything is relative. So now this here, this third one is actually in your assignment body because there's no parentheses there. Because you're referring to the fact that in 2018, someone said something that you're now using. Does that make sense? Yeah, kind of. And the last format is a direct quotation. So this is not just a citation. Now we've moved into quote land, where direct quotation of everything is relative. Then this part here is the citation because it's Hibbert who in 2018 said it on page 1 of whatever document, which we'll find in the reference. So this is in the body of the paper. So if you're using a direct quote, the page number is used, or a paragraph number if there's no pagination. So page document with page numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. But if online document which is just free text, if you were to print it out, you get 10 pages worth of printing, but there's no page numbers. So you go down to paragraph numbers. So paragraph 15, it was said, and in that year. They're the main 4 formats that you'll come across in out there, whether it be books, journals, articles, whatever. Papers will have this general type of formatting.
What's the difference?
Difference between 1 and 4?
Why you put 1, but it's just obviously the way you use the assignment or the
Yeah, for this, it's word for word. But could if everything is relative is the actual quote, you could say in the top sentence, you could say related to else. Well, everything in life is related to something different or is relative to something else. So you're sort of expanding on that of everything being relative is given credit to some. Yeah, so um, it's a generalization for the top one, whereas the bottom is a quote. Just for this purpose, they happen to be the same. And yeah, I almost changed it for between the two so it didn't confuse, but hopefully wasn't going to be too confusing. Yeah. So that's citations. So what we're going to do is have a look at just a couple of general examples. This is the book that I've been using. You can get this on, well, you can get it in hard copy and also in soft copy. I've got it on my Kindle reader. Once you Amazon log on, any device with your log on and have this through the cloud. So $16 is what I paid for it. It's very, very good. So I'll just switch across to the handbook. So this is the actual book. There's pages and pages and pages of this. So I'll just take you through a few, just give you a feel, and you've probably seen this anyway. So you got all comma, initial, dot, space, initial, space, comma, and there's a certain that it follows. So you got author 1, author 2, author 3 with their initials that follow. There's the year, the article. Now in this particular example, this is a periodical. So you got the title, if there's a volume number, and then pages through to pages. So P dot means page number 1, as in a single page. PP dot means multiple pages. So pages 6 to 20, for example. If it's just a single page that you're quoting from, it'll be just page 5, P dot 5. Because you got multiple, it's PP. So these things you pick up as you sort of do more. Now the DOI here is listed. Digital Object Identifier is what it stands for. And it's a unique number assigned to an article that's out of space. So people tend to love DOIs because you can click on it, it takes you straight there, unless you need a login. You've got to log into a or something. But it's literally like the number plate for a vehicle. There's a number plate like your car's, and it will identify your car straight away. This DOI identifies that paper. So there's a whole heap of rules surrounding, but that's the general format that you find for a periodical. And here's a journal article with a DOI included. So here's an actual example. So you got author 1, the initials, and author 2, initials, year of publication. There's the title of the actual paper. Now you'll notice that's normal text, and health physiology is the italics. That's the name of the actual journal. That's how you can distinguish one from the other. The name of the article within the journal is, because the journal is italicized. 24 would be the volume number. 25 to 29. So you actually don't have PP in this. It's actually in the citation. You've got P. And there's a DOI there. I'll go down to a couple more different examples. Just to a non-journal article. Here's a magazine. So you got, and once again, you'll pick up the formats pretty much all the way through. Authors are always first with their initials. Year, sometimes magazines. There's the name of the just highlight that there. And then you've got in italics, monitor on psychology. Sometimes you've got format, you've got 39 brackets 5, so it'd be like volume 30 to 5, because maybe 39 is the 39th year that it's been running, and it's the 5th publication that year. So, and all these numbers will change depending on the format that the like the magazine or the journal or whatever subscription follows. So don't get hung up too much, because it'll say volume and issue at the bottom of the, volume or whatever. So that's when you go back to the good old rules, and you can even just Google sometimes, APA 6th, seeing a magazine, boom, you'll get examples. So don't get too worried at the moment about the exact format. But I just want to show you general ways that people do things. That's another one here. Here's an online newspaper. So you got the author, initials, you got year and date, because this turns over every day. It's not just once a year, every 3 years. It's a day really closely issued together in time, a bit more of a specific time. So that's why you got the December 11 there. Once again, you've got your name of the, and then italics is the name of the paper, and then this is your website. You can, the easy highlight. Yep. Oh no, sorry, you don't need to hyperlink. No, you just need to, because they can easily just copy and paste it into the browser. You can if you really want to, but it won't remarks. So there's no point there. So yeah, here we go. So there's a few different books here. Title of the work. So now the title of the work is just straight italics. Citation is in the city where it might be published, New York, San, or whatever, and then publisher, McGraw, for example. And there we'll go in shortly. We'll go into examples of where to find this information on books, and I'm pretty sure you're ready with finding info. So yeah, here you got chapters of a book. So you got author, second author, year of publication, chapter of in. So this is the chapter of a book within the book. So the book is, the name of the book is actually this one here. There's the authors and there's the title. So the highlighted part here is the book title, and this part here is actually the chapter. Then you've got to specify which pages that chapter occupies within the book. And you've got the location and publisher. Think of a book that we use a lot that would use this kind of format. Tintinelli. Yep. That's actually the one I've used for my example, where to get info. So I'll leave it there for the examples, but we'll be going through a few more examples anyway. So here's an example of an in-text citation. This is once again from the manual. I just want to pull out a few details that to an untrained eye may be invisible. So here's the first citation within a quote. Gil, you got a for the second one. So we also have, when you have multiple sources to one here, so that sentence citation, there's got two different ideas, several ideas in fact. This citation shows that there were two different books that you looked up to get that one sentence. And the citation is indicated as such with this semicolon here, which is highlighted, I think. So within the parentheses, whenever you've got two authors in a single reference, you have the ampersand, this one here. that is used outside of a parenthesis. It's only parentheses. When you've got the different sources separated, it's by a semicolon, highlighted in pink here. When you've got two different sources, what you do is you put the first source alphabetically first by surname. So Gilbert before McManus in the dictionary, if you were to have it in the dictionary. So Gilbert is, say, Wazowski and Gilbert, because Gilbert, that reference. Gilbert and Wazowski is there, they come as a unit. Then you got McManus. He's second because he comes later in the alphabet. You would have an Arthur, surname Arthur, he would come first because Arthur comes before. So you got Arthur, semicolon, space, Gilbert and Wazowski, 92, and then McManus. So here you've got, I've underlined the spaces that take place. So if you were to manually enter this as a citation into the body of your paper, you just got to make sure that you have a space for each of these. Often I see people don't put spaces in, and once you've seen a few correctly, you see one that just looks crunched up. So you need to have the spacing to be not picked up and lose little marks here and there. And the citation here is actually still inside the sentence. So the last parenthesis goes before the period of the sentence. So that's an example of one citation involving multiple sources. This one here, we have another citation. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 authors here, and then there's an ampersand, which I don't think I've highlighted actually, between the third and the fourth. So you got 1, 2, 3, and fourth. Once again, there's just spacing there. Now the difference between this one and this one is that there is a good old et al. After Raymond. Now what that means is there's more than 5 authors who wrote that book. So when you have more than 5 authors, you're going to go straight for an et al. Within the citation. Otherwise, you're going to fill up the body of your text with authors' names rather than actual information. So this is why the first one of these has the 4 authors mentioned, because it's less than 5. And that's, sometimes it gets a bit long in the tooth, but it's just the way it is. So 5 or more, which means and others in Latin. I think it's Latin. Okay, and then you got our last one here, Holtz 1000. He's a boring one after everything we've just been through. It's just a single reference and parentheses. So that's an example of citations that includes quite a few elements. Any questions there, mate? Pretty good? Cool. Okay, so this is a tabulated data within, once again, a lot of info, but I'll break it down for you. So just to make it to the eye for now, you got your first in-text citation in text, and then subsequent in-text citation. This is when you've got it in the text, in the body of the text, and this side here is when you're using the brackets, the parentheses. Once it's in text, and then subsequent. So sometimes when you introduce information for the first time, you got to do it in a longer format. Second time and every other time afterwards. It's kind of like saying the ground and then brackets MCG. So the first time you refer to something, you can go the full name, but then other times if it's a very well-known acronym, you can then acronymize. Right side of that vertical line, you've got and versus %. So with the left side, Walker and Allen, it's outside of the brackets. Here's the brackets here because it's Walker and Allen. So you're and Allen, 2004, said something. But if you were just to say the straight up phrase and give credit to Walker and Allen after the fact, then you would use the ampersand inside the parentheses. So that's the difference between and ampersand. Going below onto a red line now, you can see all these multiples are now got et al with them. This is for subsequent citations in text, but you'll notice the first citations still have the and up to 5 authors. But everyone else is et al because it's just easier to refer to them and others after you've done your first introduction. So just to make it a little bit more obvious for you, in the left-hand side box, 1 to 5 authors, so-and-so, the last one, for the first time. But notice over here, it's now and. So it's only the first time that we do it. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but after you've done a few, you sort of remember to use the good old ampersand. For the first, I'll say that again. This is outside the bracket, so use the and. This is inside the bracket, so use the ampersand. That's what I should sequence have the et al. That was try to confuse. Start them out. Yeah, it's sometimes you just got to sit down and slowly digest. It took me a while to and you've got to do it your way. You've got to sit down and work it, nut it out your way, and once you've got it, you've got it. And take this one here, 6 or more authors. We go straight for the jugular, et al, all the way through, even for our first introduction. There's too many names to repeat all the time, every time. They go, okay, that makes sense. We'll just do the once. The first order for context, and then all the others because the reference is listed back at the article.
Be the first one in that reference.
Yeah, so Wasserstein will be the first person of that textbook or article. And so they're normally the main person. So when we refer to Mariab, there's actually 3 or 4 people within that reference. But Mariab is the one, or Tintinelli is another one. Tintinelli isn't actually the first person who wrote Tintinelli, first person. But we refer to the name of it is Tintinelli's Emergency Medicine. So it's common to refer to these books by the main man, as it were, or person. But that's not necessarily the one who gets the first. It all depends on the order of the information on the book. Down here in the bottom, we have actually a group, not one person. So the National Institute of Mental Health, brackets NIMH, 2003. And then as we go into the subsequent for both of these columns, it's just NIMH. So you've introduced the concept of the National Institute of Mental Health, but every other time you can just go NIMH because it's quicker, it's easier, and you've explained your way through. Same with in the body of a paper. If you say CPR, is important for life-sustaining measures, you need to first define cardiopulmonary before brackets CPR. After that, CPR all the way is fine. Now it's normally very well known, but if you do, you get some person who actually hasn't read about CPR before. They go, "What's CPR?" Practice like you need to explain yourself as an academic to a person who maybe not at your level. So you're bringing the reader up to your level by explaining your acronyms, by introducing information they haven't read before. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reading you. If they already knew what you had to say, then they wouldn't read you. So that's why you bring the reader up to your level, telling them what you're reading about, and then easy to and then away. So here, I'm just recapping, the MH is introduced for the subsequent and till the end of the body. And you've got a square bracket following the full term within the parentheses. So what's here, suppose mental health was to say a particular something, you're not quoting them, but you're paraphrasing, you say these are the people who said it, and that's their acronym. From now on, I'm going to use the acronym. And so you've within the citation indicated by the parentheses, and here within the citation, you have a bracket explaining the. But you can't use parentheses within parentheses. That doesn't exist in academia. It exists in maths, but not here. That's why you can have square brackets, also the brace brackets as well. And I think in maths even they don't even use more than one set. So you got to do an order, and so that's the order of hierarchy of the square versus round. So that's why we refer to parentheses, round versus brackets, square, braces, which are the curly ones.
Sorry to interrupt.
All right.
Makes the opposite.
Okay. Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So, citation, quotation, referencing. What's the difference? A citation indirect mention of someone else's work, but doesn't actually quote it directly. So going back to the good old everything's relative. From the quote takes place in the body of the assignment and only mentions who and when. So you don't need to go into the details because that's the job of this list. Because this is only a citation. It's like, oh, by the way, so and so said. So we cite a lot to each other in conversation because we go, and then that's actually a citation. John told you. So it's quite yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's quite we do it all the time without even knowing it, because if you're saying a conversation, someone saying a certain thing, and you'll go, didn't John say that? But he's not giving credit for it. He's taking it as his own. So he's actually verbally plagiarizing. And so you can already see how it discredits that person who's not giving credit to the other because they're taking stuff on board as their own and trying to say, oh, this is my idea. And like, no, it's not. And well, that's why it's not your work. And that's why we do it. So citations are usually paraphrased. It's either a succinct summary or it's a different wording or it's just a reference even to, according to the law of universalism, brackets, whoever wrote it, because you didn't write the law of universalism, but you're referring to it. So it's a citation. So a quotation is a direct repetition, word for word, of someone else's work enclosed in quotation marks, and we've seen a couple already. It takes place in the body of a, and I don't know if you've ever come across large quotations. So greater than 40 words is our cutoff for a direct or a block quotation, as we call it, which does not have quotation marks, and we'll go through on. Quotations contain the author and the year, but also the page number or paragraph, because you're directly saying something specifically now. So the person might want to go, oh, read that, and go directly to that page. So it's just because you're being extremely specific with you've got to be a little specific with your. That's just one of the rules. So here's an example. All body functions depend on the integrity of the cells. So McCants and Huether, 2010, page 1. That's actually the opening statement of the book, Pathophysiology. So yeah, that's if you were to quote them, that's exactly how you would do it in the body of your paper, and the body ends with the citation in the parentheses is part of the body, but it's not part of your argument, if it makes sense. Okay, so here's a long quote, a short quote. Now, the top line should say, if a quote begins in the middle of a sentence, in the passage with quotation marks, cite the source in parentheses immediately after quotation marks, and continue. Use no other punctuation unless the meaning of the sentence requires. So interpreting these results, Robbins et al., so lots of them, in 2003, as bracketed, suggested that therapists, all the way through to concerns, it's exactly out of their book or out of their paper. Then you got page 541 in parentheses after the quote, before the comma. So that's the format that we use for a quotation that's short enough to not disrupt the body of the flow of what you're trying to say. And they're actually separated. So if that was to be a citation, if all at the end, you could actually say, therapists in dropout cases may have inadvertently validated blah, 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 blah concerns, and then have parentheses, Robbins et al., comma, 2003, comma, page 541, parentheses. You could also do that as down the bottom here, actually. They've done it. So there's a second way you could do it, because the quote for the second one starts here and ends here, but you've incorporated it into what you're already saying. Now you give it to the person who finished your sentence for you, but you haven't had to refer to them directly, like in Robbins et al. For the first one. So the top one is all a mixture between a quotation, commas, but you've cited them indirectly by referring to them in your body. So you've referred to them directly in the top one. In the bottom one, you've referred to them by quoting them. So it's referred quote, but it's still a quote in the second one. Sense? If you've got a large quotation, greater than 40 words, there's a different way that we set it. It's mentioned as a freestanding block of text, and there's no quotation marks. So we call it a block quotation. What happens down here, we start a new line. So this here is you talking, but then from here, co-presence right down to assembly, and we've got as an indented to show that the start of a new paragraph. So we've observed everything that the original author has written, and then per page 111 to 112. So it's obviously gone over the page. So you just say gone over the page. You could actually say Purcell doesn't agree with this, colon, have the direct quote, and then put down here, sorry, Purcell 1997 in brackets, does not agree with this, colon, and then put page numbers down here at the end of it. Do it. And things, it's a case of monkey see, monkey do, where you go, oh, I know I need to, you run through books, find an example, and do it. I remember years ago, I would write musical, I'd handwrite on the sheet. I couldn't remember how I was supposed to go. So I'd run through all this classical music, and go, there it is, and I'd copy it with my song. So I'd written to correct as I could, even though I didn't know the exact. So a lot of these you'll go, oh, I remember I have to do something different with a large quote, just find it, or even Google block quotations APA 6 style, boom, it'll show you how to do it. So this is, don't walk away from this thinking, I must remember that. Think to yourself, okay, now that I'm aware of what to do for large quotes, you can either get the APA 6 book or just Google many examples out there if they're not already in the textbook. So that's a large quote. Block text, indented, showing you the quote. Clear as mud? Yep. Cool. And now I just go through, if it's one of them, yeah. It's,
I think it's like you said, that's more aware. I heard that before. But now I'm doing something like that. I'm aware of it now.
it's kind of like learning to drive. But before I learned to drive, I just drove with my dad. Once I learned the road rules, I go, there's that sign, there's that sign. Oh, we crossed the line. We didn't do this. We didn't indicate enough. It's like there's so many things you become aware of acutely, or start researching brand of car, you'll find every detailed difference down to the badged location with your selected area of research that you'll find the differences and you'll know them. But before, they were just cars. You know, there's a Falcon, there's a Commodore. Oh no, that's an XS. Blah 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 blah. How can you know that? Well, the steering wheel. You know, the windows are up, but you know because you trained eye. Okay, so referencing is the chunk. It's complete details of where you got the information. So anyone can go look at the back. Oh, that's where I got it from. Because half the time that's where you got your information from someone else's work. Located at the end of the assignment, as we know. There are so many different styles. At least, yeah, half a dozen to we get six where we are. That's what they want us to use. And so that's what it's not a bibliography. Bibliography is more everything that you research in general, but didn't necessarily use to get that information. So you might use it for a video presentation or general stuff, doing a poster or background information. But for actual referencing, it's and citations especially, you're only referencing what you cited. If you haven't cited it, you won't reference it in the back. That's probably the easiest way to say that. And uses a hanging indent, which I'll show you in a second. So we'll go to the handbook, page 205. So this is a references list for the actual APA handbook. I won't go through all of them, but here we can see, firstly, hopefully obviously, it's all alphabeticalized. So starting with A, working down through to Z, in order of the first author in that list. So once again, you've got 3 authors in a book. The first author is the one you use to slot him in. And I'll see if I can find here Bentley, Perenboom, Hodge, Pastana, and Warren, and Washington. So they happen to be in alphabetical order already within that, but one that we on that list in that book. So he's the one that we use to slot in after APA and before Blue Book, not the Blue Book. A, and the are articles, grammatical articles. They do not count in alphabetical sorting. So the Blue Book would find the title and then a uniform system of citation. Blue Book, the. That's why at the library you see Blue Book, comma, the, because the doesn't count for an alphabetical sorting, A, and the. This is our hanging indent. So you got American, blah, 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 and then the next line, it hangs down underneath. So you can tell the new entry because it comes back out to here, and then each line hangs. And you can set it in Word to do that. I'll show you how if you're not sure. And it just easily sets it up. So you don't have to go enter tab, enter tab, enter tab every time. It'll just do it and format it through as you type. So it's a very powerful tool. So if you have a single space paper, do a single space reference. If you do double space, it doesn't really change the format. Sometimes people can get away with cheating a little bit and you might go 1.5 space to fit it nicely in the page. So it doesn't go, you got one line going on the next page, no matter how much you change the margins, do it because it's just too much information. So you just go 1.5 spacing. Normally people can see what you're trying to do. I don't think our markers will be that really, what's the word? Aggressive with their marking. So, but as long as you realize that, that's the normal setup there. One with the DOI title, you've got the date there, you've got the, APA Publications and Communications Board, blah, blah, blah. That's the group that actually wrote it. That's the year, the actual Name of the article. American Psychologist is the italicized publication. Obviously, page or volume or issue 63, as indicated by just the straight 63. 839 to 51 will be the page numbers. DOI. A lot of times you can click on that DOI and it'll take you straight there. Some of these things automatically hyper needing to do it, and DOIs tend to do that sometimes. So I go to the next page, just one more page worth. So you can go through the alphabet. Here we've got book. It comes straight after the title. GLAD Media Reference Guide, 7th edition. In our edition, which we'll show you shortly. This is retrieved from that web. If you have editors of an edited book, I think I saw one on the previous page. Can't see it here. You have eds, eds, full stop, capital eds. Edition is little ed, 7th edition. Editors, large ed. And that's how you can distinguish one another. And once again, with Tintinelli, we'll be able to show you that example. Here we go, eds. There it is there. So it's straight after this, and it's in its own bracket. Once again, don't think, I have to memorize this for now. Think of okay, they're editors. I've got to work out or remember how to do it with an example. And with the tools, I think it does it for you. Eds at the end of it all, you've got no dramas. So there's Merriam-Webster, 11th edition. There's the year and it's in brackets. Springfield, Massachusetts. So Springfield is a city. Massachusetts is the state. So in not well-known places, very large capital cities, you put state as well as the New York, New York. You can just put New York because there's only one of them in the other one. Even Paris. You could put France if you want, but Paris is pretty well known. Even Sydney. But if you were to put a non-capital city, for sure, you put the state. And Merriam-Webster is the group or the author. So the colon separates the author from the publication locations. So anyway, I'll stop showing you examples of these at this point. But so many different examples you can look up. Okay. So paraphrasing. Put a couple little comics up here. It's what do you call? It demonstrates the funny side sometimes of paraphrasing and people stealing ideas. The excuses may. You can actually self-plagiarize too. I don't know if you knew that, but if people here, if you submit an article for publication, it's published. If you submit the same article somewhere else for publication without change, without saying it's been published previously, plagiarizing yourself because you credit a second time for new work as if it's new, but it's not new anymore. So I've actually referred to myself in a previous or in a assignment because I want to use the same stuff, but I've actually done this already. So I thought, well, I'll just do it because I actually wrote this paper and then came to this awesome conclusion with my argument. And so I started with the next assignment and kept going. So I just referred to that paper where I built this argument to make a point. And I have to explain myself again. I thought, how am I going to get around this? So I thought, oh, well, I'll just refer back to myself. It doesn't happen very often, but yeah, it's as long as it's just aware you can't submit the same thing twice, and once you let people know, and you'll see sometimes the name of an article previously published in this as that title. So it's giving credit for the fact that it's actually not new anymore. They've put it back in, and so it does happen as long as you cite it or credit it. So researchers do not claim the words and ideas of another as their own. They give credit where it's due. Quotation marks. Each time we paraphrase, we do a citation or a quote. You need to credit the source of the text. The following is an example of how one might appropriately paraphrase. So we don't have the book right to be able to appreciate how this is maybe different. But what it's saying is, as stated, this book, there's the year and the name, or author, sorry, group. That's the quote or their paraphrase. And then here, further down, it actually refers to, again, as a publication manual, explains. So it's brought up information here that's previously referred to and continues as blah, blah, blah. Actually do that. Simon, if you were to say Johnson and Benson introduced a blah, 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 you did a whole paragraph. Johnson and Benson continue to defend their argument saying blah, 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 blah. You don't have to actually bring up the year again and all that because you're still talking about the paragraph. So once you've brought up their argument, you can talk about it and then refer back to them if you're still in the same chunk of. If you were to go into a separate paragraph, cite someone else, blah, 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 and then once again you talk about Johnson and Benson, then you have to recite them a second time because you've changed information sources between ideas. But if you're talking about one author, one idea, one paragraph, you can refer to them once about what they're talking about. And that's fine. So this is an example of paraphrasing. Once again, don't present the work of someone else as your own, and everything is fine. So, tricks. So this isn't the only thing, the only way to do it, but this is how I do it. Say the same thing a different way in your style. And if you tell someone a story verbally, you'll change it to, leave out the expletives or chuck in a few, or there's so many ways to paraphrase. So, the cat sat on the mat versus the feline relaxed on the rug. Respiratory distress versus dyspnea. Overdose, pharmacological toxicity. So, the second one might be the textbook version, or you might talk about drug overdose and just, it's not a quote anymore. It's the same thing. Versus experience and negative patient outcome. Bit extreme, but media all the time. Well, not this, but people things like this, I should say. And it's euphemism of something really bad. And yeah, everywhere. You almost need every time to include a citation because it's someone else's work. So just because you're saying it differently doesn't mean you shouldn't give them credit, because if it's not your idea, you're not quoting it anymore, you're paraphrasing. Synonyms. Awesome. They're so good. You need to practice using synonyms. And it's not just, it could be adjectives, verbs, adverbs. This is where you can get used to your grammar skills or develop your grammar skills. Find ways to say the same thing, and it's the way to do it. Build your vocabulary. Often you've got to look up the dictionary to find out what the person actually is talking about, because you're not at that level. But then you can dumb it down for your readers, or for you, the writer, if you want. So your way, because it demonstrates understanding, or it develops your understanding at least. I've had to do something for an hour before I could write a sentence of it, because I just did not know enough of the content material to be able to summarize that. And that's what develops your learning as well. Reorder the words. So you've got this, and this. Change them around, because Turnitin, once again, might not would recognize that and that, not recognize 1, 5, 3, 6, 4, 2 as your order of words. Not that you're trying to beat the system or cheat, but it's a paraphrase. Yeah. And I'll demonstrate that in a second. Reword sentences, combine them into one, reduce repetition. So there's so many ways you can do it. Leave out details that are too specific. So extremely technical terminology or specific statistics with numbers or decimals. You might round them up or down to the nearest whole rather than going a 0.05 whatever percentile. It's not you. An astute reader will know when you've broken pattern with your syntax, the way you talk. If you start talking like someone else verbally, you can tell, change accent or use different vocabulary. He doesn't say that normally. So with writing, you get to pick up on people's phrases. They use certain keywords or vocabulary or things a few times. Yeah, okay, that's right. Even George Lucas has done it. He's got certain phrases in Star Wars. You pick them up throughout. Oh, he said that before, and yeah, so it's everywhere. Summarize complex concepts with simple phrases, not just sentences. Sometimes a whole paragraph can be or needs to be done. So just like before, APA said, blah, 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 they refer and refer back to them. So make sure you paraphrase sufficiently and not insufficiently. Otherwise, you may as well quote it. So say it your way completely, or say it their way completely, and quote it rather than cite it. And that's keeps you within the safe paraphrasing boundaries, I guess. And these aren't the only ways to do it, but it's just the ways I've developed over time. And once you get your own way of doing things, it's really easier. So I went to a book, Tintinelli, I think it was, opened up, found a paragraph, and that one, I thought, let's do a paraphrase. So this is what I found, which it's very convoluted, but I'll read it out to you. Although the growth of bacterial inoculum is directly related to the time interval from injury to laceration repair, there is no clearly defined relationship of time to closure to clinical infection. Therefore, from time from injury to presentation is only one element to be considered, in addition to the wound etiology, location, degree of contamination, and the importance of cosmetic appearance before determining whether or not to perform primary wound closure. That's a massive sentence. That's actually sentences in that whole thing. So I thought that's a really good example to try to paraphrase. Because if you were to chuck that in an assignment, people are going to go, that's not you. Hell, it's someone's highfalutin words like inoculum, no one ever uses, or it's a specific industry specific word. So I thought, how are we going to do this? So I just broke each coloured phrase to synonymise. So rather than say the growth of bacterial inoculum, the development of bacterial resistance. So I had to actually look up inoculum, and I found out it from inoculate, you inject something to develop a resistance to it. So when you inoculate, or the flu, we were just talking about it before, you're inoculating yourself. So you're developing a resistance, technically. This is referring to infection, this passage, so it could be possibly like development of bacterial infection, rather than resistance, but something's resisting something else to grow. So I thought I'd chuck it in anyway. Is directly related to, can be to. So it's a little bit not as exact, but it's still related. No defined of time. I just put there's no set time frame associated. Says the same thing. But it takes away the clearly defined relationship phrase, which is what turns up. Onset of infection. Presentation of what? Infection. We're talking about infection from wound repairs. And if you're talking about infection already, you can talk about infection as a presentation. So change it. Here, I've just put new sentence. Massive sentence, needs to be broken up. Normally 50 words or less is an length. In addition to, I've just put other factors include. Now I've changed the words. Wound etiology, location, degree. I've put location etiology, to switch them around, and severity of contaminants. Now that's a bit of a wishy-washy, but it just rather than the contamination and use, and I thought, well, how to describe them? Their level and severity rather than degree. So I agree that the degree of contamination is more eloquent. It sounds nicer, but if you want to get away from the direct quotation, and this is me on paper, it could be, you could do it your own way. Cosmetic considerations post wound closure. The importance of cosmetic appearance. So I've gotten rid of and put considerations, and put it first. Put and patient comorbidity related risk factors. So risk factors. I've extrapolated there comorbidities. I think, well, that's what would cause risk factors: age, what they've already got, blah blah blah. Well, it doesn't have to happen this way. This is just a way that I've done it. Before I perform primary wound closure, all the wound's suitability for primary closure. Now, it's understood that you have to have some key phrases in here or terms because that's what you're talking about. Otherwise, there's no point talking using this or a source. You still cite them, still get the credit and the year and all that. But this is what they've said. So if I was to put these side by side, there's mine, my finished product, and actually you can see I put numbers here as well. 3, 4, 5. To break it up even more, I've created a list within my sentence, easier for the reader to follow specifically, but also breaks the pattern of what they had. So Turnitin, once again, it's all about Turnitin. The software, the reader, see, the software will get tricked possibly because it's now a new phrase, new everything else. But I know it's so-and-so read. Maybe they've read 3 assignments and everyone uses the same author because it's what the assignment material is maybe. They can say, he's changed it around, he's talked about the same thing and he's still cited. Well done. So that's paraphrased. Now, it may not be the best ever. You know, some other people might go, oh, do that better. And that's excellent because that's what I want to hear. Your way of paraphrasing. This is my way of paraphrasing. And here is the original. Just to see, you can see they're about the same length. The white on the left is still original. You'll find them in there. It's still their work that I'm citing and paraphrasing. But it just shows you how you can say something differently. So just moving on to end text. This is where we put all. I thought I'd been through this anyway. Author, chapter, publication title, year of publication, page numbers, everything. Website, you got it, and DOI available. You won't always get all of this information. Sometimes it's very hard to find information. You may have to scroll right down to the bottom of a website to get copyright 2014 or last updated January 26, 2014. So that's when you would put your year of referencing because that's the last time this person wrote that. Centennial was produced in 2016. That's the last time they produced it. Write it down. If you're referring to a previous author or previous version, I should say, use that in your referencing. So it's always good when you can update a reference with a newer version. So once again, it needs to have the correct formatting, spacing, punctuation, everything for each media format. Format means a journal more information than a book because you've got the issue and volume number or the year or the month of publication. We'll just have the year of publication. Issue number, no volume number. If you've got a chapter within and edit page numbers, and if you just got the book itself, you refer to the book. So you don't have to include page numbers. It's a chapter in the edited book. In the all these little things that just can trip people up if they just don't know. So this is about awareness. And then if you need, go back and literally Google how to do it or get the book or find examples because every correctly written page is done the correct way. Referencing guides. I have a couple I can send people out to people if you need. Um, Basically, the universities produce them. I'll just leave their logo on them because it's their work, but it says you can send them as you need. Um, their work's on the front. And time at uni, I spent replicating and reproducing another source, and I just transcribe that to my source, the formatting and the spacing and everything. Yeah, it's very frustrating at first, but it gets easier with time. And very shortly, we'll go through the Microsoft referencing tool because it's very good. So I just thought I'd chuck in quickly managing book information. This is the latest, and you can see here, I'll just use the mouse here quickly. There's the edition. There's all of this actually is, you got some Tintinelli here. Actually, she's first over that. You got other sub editors here. You've got the publisher there, and you got all these little locations. Which one to use? Probably the bane of everyone's referencing existence, I'm sure. You think, oh, which one? I'll just highlight a few things here. This is more information, which the next screen shows a blow up of the left-hand side page. Just quickly before we go on, there's a chapter 56, type within the edited book. So that's Klein, J.A. brackets 2016, venous thromboembolism in Tintinelli, blah, 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 blah. Tintinelli's emergency medicine. I'm ahead of myself now. So this is the blow up of that left side page. So what I want to show here, printed in the United States of America. I've got multiple publishing information locations. I try to localize where it was physically printed. So it was probably done at that New York. So it's not done in San Juan or Singapore or Sydney, or it would be done in New York because it's printed in the United States. So when we go back to our previous slide, you've got New York here. So yeah, I would use that one. You're right. Someone has told me that New York is first, so it's not sure about that. I don't know much about it. Once again, to me, it probably doesn't matter that much. I don't know how specific the market is, because all I want to see is that you've referenced the correct thing. And those technically, this publisher is everywhere in those locations. So we don't know specifically. Yeah, yeah, I don't think they're going to check New York and it was Chicago. How are they going to China? I mean, it was printed in New York, yes, but there is a just somewhere publishing location, colon, publisher. That's the most important, and secondary is where it was. So I try to aim for the country. In Australia, it's your castle. But yeah, I try to like itemize the country at least. What have I got here? Copyright. Now you'll notice that there are under here are all the versions. So try to isolate the latest version, which is normally it's written a few places. Another thing I want to highlight here, there's the edition. Here's the colon. Now it doesn't actually show in the title on the front book, on the front of the page. It just said the big Tintinelli medicine, and then every time put a colon and the little text. caps like you've got here, because in the back of the referencing you probably have just straight text rather than all caps. But the colon separates the main title from the secondary title. You won't see that on the page of the book, on the cover, but every time you'll find it, you'll go into the pages, the colon. It's because the entire title starts at Tintinelli's and finishes at Guide. That's the full title. And the colon just helps us separate the primary from the secondary titles. And you can get sometimes also all information here. So there's once again the full title, and then the slash separates editor-in-chief from the other editors, or the editors from the title book. Not much more you can get from there that I want to talk about, but you've got ISBN there if you need it. Got other information. So sometimes it's hard to sift through information in the front cover, but if you know what you're looking for, you can normally find it somewhere, and it's generally at the top on the left-hand side. Okay, so what I want to do, I'll switch across to Word and just go through the referencing thing. So I've set up a pseudo assignment here, and we're going to go through the a few exercises. So sentence 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Each of them has their own sets references that I've set up. So how did I do that? Okay, let's go on a screen. I click on the References tab and it opens up here. Now, this is, once again, this is a Mac. You may find slightly different formatting but you'll find the same stuff. So in References, all of this this ribbon applies to the References tab under here. The part that we're going to be doing is this little section here, which applies to references specifically. So when I click on the citations, this little box opens up. In the PC, I believe there's a drop-down arrow, just like you see this arrow here. There'll be a drop-down arrow, and this menu will appear down here for references that have already been set up. So what I was supposed to bring a book in and I forgot. We can insert a citation here, and we're going to create a source. So the first thing we need to do, I'll just get out of that quickly. We need to make sure the APA is selected. So out of all these different styles, I believe that's the numbering system there. There's the Harvard system that I did years ago. Just select APA 6. Normally it's going to default to that. So you click on Insert Citation. Now what we need to do is just make sure that our type of source is correct. So if we've got a book, we'll do a book. If it's a section of a book, Tintinelli, book with a chapter. There's a journal, periodical, right down to miscellaneous when you create your own. So we'll just go book for now. And we can type in our author, John Smith. Now, if it's a corporate author, remember the NIMH, National Institute for Mental Health? If you were to click that, you could put it there, and then it becomes author at the end rather than of the title. So you put National Institute of Mental Health, title, details, colon at the end, and it'll be author rather than a publisher, because the author did publish. So sometimes you have organizations that are self-publishers. They publish their own stuff. And that's why right at the end it'll be author, because they're already mentioned at the front, the whatever body. So, you know, TMR even, Transport and the road authorities. They'll be the author for that document produced by the government. Now, if we want to...
So change that instead of author, it will be corporate author.
Yeah, so you can click corporate author and put it there. Now, Some things I won't go through all of this today, but you just got to play around with it, become familiar, and the format will change depending on how you enter information. But yeah, so if I was to go edit here, I can enter more authors. So there's Smith, John. It's been changed already. So let's put Harry. Well, let's put Frank's. Let's put James, just for kids. Now here I can add on the PC. There might be like an add button. So I go add, boom. Let's go another one. Shelley, Michael, Shelley. Add. Let's do another one. Running out of names. Brown, Tom. So now when we add them, they're still in order of entry. So the order that you enter them, that's here in order, not alphabetical. So you got to make sure you put the biggest names first, essentially the biggest print. So the biggest names like Tintinelli is the big one, and then you got two other small ones, and you got four small ones after that. So you sort of do in that order. This tends to be the way who contributed the most. Click OK. So now you can see Smith, John, semicolon, space. It's doing it all for us. Okay. Let's do a title. I don't know. How to fold paper aeroplanes. It was done in Sydney. Publisher, this is go McGraw-Hill. They'll probably kill me for that. And it was done this year. Okay, so if we click, watch this list here. What happens when I click OK? Boom. So this list contains all of my previously set up references. And where this cursor is flashing, that's actually where the cursor was when I clicked Insert Citation. So I could go to anywhere in this document. If I want to go select source type here, if I double click now on a previously existing, it puts it in. Boom. And now you see it's a bit of a gray box there when I roll the mouse over. I can actually now click on it and do things with it. Realize I've made a mistake. I can edit the citation or edit the source. So if I edit the source and go, no, it wasn't this one, it was someone else, or change the spelling, then I can go OK. And it hasn't this time because it didn't change anything. But if I make it a change, it'll say, do you want to change this to everything? You go click, yes. It changes everywhere it appears, it'll change. So if I go to here, I want to add a reference, double click, boom. If I want to do another one, I can do more than one. But now I got the setting. If I got two sources for one citation, how do I get around the whole semicolon thing? So what you can do, this is where the manualing comes in unless I work out a better way. You can convert this to static text. That one and this one, and KL. So this one needs to come second, doesn't it? So I'll put this around here. Then all I need to do, backspace, semicolon, space, done. So you can see now Klein 2016 comes before Lee alphabetically, who wrote something in 2017 to do with the year of publication. Got nothing to do with the titles of the books. It's all about the alphabetical appearance of the first author of each citation. So now we can just leave that because we've put it in. And next time, it's not often you'll have to do that, but if you do have a few, you can just insert, and then it's done. So let's make sure I've done everything here. Click boxes, double click. So now, if I wanted to change certain details, on the master list. Down here, I've got my little manager. Now on the PC, I believe that up here there'll be a manager nearby. So on my one, I go citation source manager. It brings up here. So basically, what it's showing me, there's my master list that my computer is holding in its memory. I have yet to work out if we go to different computers. I don't know if that master list travels with the document itself or the master computer where it was created. So you may have to play around with that. But I think from what I've worked, master list travels with the document you save to a flash drive, and it will transfer, I think. But in the current list, you can see these ticks. That means indicates that these sources are cited somewhere in the document. So if I wanted to add, if I've got one I can add, well, let's take one off. If I want to get rid of Smith, John, Franks, and Harry, I can delete it from here. I've used him. I have to go the other way. If I had a new one here, placeholder isn't used, I can this list. Now, a placeholder means you're creating a citation, you've got to come back and fill. So you can play, and once again, it's in citations, insert citation, insert placeholder. It just basically says, I've got to get a source for this. And then you can go back, edit it, fill in the details, and it'll populate. So I've copied a placeholder across to this list, but I haven't used it yet. And here it appears. So I can, somewhere here, if I want to go here, I can go placeholder, double tap, put the placeholder there. Later on, I can click on this and update and edit the source and put information in. For example, CPR is 30 to 2. Everyone knows that. But we've got to put a citation in because it's not common knowledge, for example. So put a placeholder there to remind you to come back, get a source anywhere, it doesn't matter because site, or someone said, you've read it, you just got to go back and find it, but it's a reminder so you submit a paper with specific information that has been sourced. So suppose we've done all of our body, we want to go down and create a reference. So we always create a new page. You can go Control Enter, creates a page break, or you can go up here, insert page break, it doesn't matter. With this one, it's called bibliography. I think on the PC it's actually called reference list. So click on that one, and you can cite bibliography or works cited. And once again, on PC it's reference list. Let's go to create works cited. So you click on that, and it's going to create a list out of everything that we've just used up here in the body. All of these quote citations are now referenced based on this information that we've gone. So every time you insert a citation and go through this process, make sure you get all that details correct. Every time you click OK, populates this list. It uses this information to generate the reference. You haven't done a thing. And you can see now, there's our folder because it doesn't know where to put it. Gleadle, Hall, Klein, Lee, McCants, they're all alphabetical. Space, comma, space, initial, period, space, space. It's all there. There's your italicized, there's your Oxford colon. It's all there. Anything to get that correct spacing, it's done it for you. So that's the power of the citation tool. On and off, where you can go in and just create your own information, manipulate it as you need, add it as desired, generate a reference list. Now, the only thing I would do here is put that in the middle and put references rather than works cited. I don't know why Mac does it like this, but it's the way it is. And you can update citations. I encourage you to play around and work out what things do, just so you can become more familiar with it. But that's basically citation and referencing in Word. That will just empower your referencing so much. It takes the work out. Now let me show you the power of this tool. If I go, oh no, look, I need to change systems. I'll go IEEE. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 7. Like what? Down here, it's now numbered in order of appearance. So it's now done a completely new system and changed all the information and spat it out the new format. You go, oh no, no, we want to do Harvard. So we'll go Harvard. Boom. Now it's Harvard style. So you've entered all this information once, and it's now the in-text citation won't change much, but it's referencing where it's a killer. I had a thing where I sent in something for publication based on an assignment I'd written, but they wanted certain referencing style only. It was the number system. So I actually had manually done the assignment, so I had to fit it all into EndNote and spit it out. But what happens is you change it, you manipulate, you change paragraphs, and the order of appearance changes of the references. So you're now out of order, but this will automatically order it for you. So it's really good. Okay, so examples of each source in the publication manual. I'll just quickly do this because I've done a bit already. So if we go to page 198, look, I've already done this. We did earlier. So yeah, we won't go through this again. It's fine. But yeah, it gives you a familiarity of everything. This this manual has been so good. It's one of the best things I ever bought to help me with my studies. And I actually bought it because one of my guys who was marking me nailed me for something, and I didn't agree with him. So I got the manual. I knew he was wrong. I proved. I thought, right, that's it. Had it all ready. I was ready for battle, and he never pulled me up on it again. I was almost disappointed, but I, I knew that I was correct with what I'd done. He nailed me for acronyms. He said, "You don't write acronyms in academic. You got to write this every time." I thought, no, that's not right. And I fired up the manual, got the page number, and it was all there, exactly how I'd done it. Introduced the first term fully, then brackets with the acronym, blah blah blah. And I was almost about to make a formal complaint, but I didn't need to. But I had the manual to back me up. That's what empowers your writing. If you know you've done it to spec, there's nothing that anyone can say that will be able to tear you down. So, a couple of take home points. There's approximately 7.6 billion ways to write the same assignment. That's one for every person in the world. Scared me last time I looked up the population. It's growing. But yeah, there's no one right way to do it. Right way to do it yours. Know the rules, follow them, and everything else will follow. It's that clear or that simple. The more you grow fluent and less frustrated, it will be with practice. It's hard at first. When I first started, I spent more time learning than writing itself, learning how to reference and cite than actually getting information, and it does your head in. I didn't actually use EndNote to start with. I forced myself to do it manually, so I took a bit longer to do it. I didn't feed it in. But Microsoft Word has actually developed these tools sent through. It used to be a separate program you had to feed in, and it was very painful. But now it's very integrated and it's very good. So yeah, it's um, it's very good. Practice makes not perfect, but much easier. We'll still make mistakes and stuff up, and people allow for that. But it's about the pattern. A mistake here and there is no indicator of your referencing that you use, and it's a behavioural thing. Be yourself. Everyone is already taken, and be creative because it's actually easier. So, did you want to go through first of all any questions that you had that I hadn't covered? Or to an example.
Like I said, altogether, I've been wrote things that's probably easier, but now that
Yeah,
future better now,
yeah.
I
It's
understand a bit better what is happening now.
I actually had to play with it to put this presentation together because I'd never used it, but it was fairly intuitive. And I had to play around with the order of the first and last name. work out, didn't need to do it backwards, it did it for me, for example. But if I didn't do it right, just change the order and then spat it out right. And
Because I was on CSO there, she said, "I use this is what I've been using."
yep,
Shows that you
yeah,
what you've done. So a few more things that I didn't realize I could do with it.
okay, good, yeah, yeah. Just play around. It takes a while, but it gets quicker the next time you do it.
Yeah.
Well, let's do a question. Um, like I said, this is not going to be a perfect example, but this is how I did it, and it passed. So I was pretty happy. Um, and you may recognize this question. I've had to de-identify it so I can stick it online and stuff, but you'll pretty much recognize where it's from. So there's the information given for the case itself, which we don't need to worry too much about because the questions of what we're going to be dealing with. So the first question is, why is the patient febrile? What are the different categories of cardiomyopathy? And state and justify your provisional diagnosis. So this is what we're actually going to be seeing. And one thing I've forgotten to say is when you write an assignment, answer the question, because you can write the best paper in the world and get 0 if you don't answer the question. And I've had to fail a couple of brilliantly written papers because they didn't answer the question. They went off on their own tangent, which is awesome, but it didn't answer the question, so they failed. So it's disappointing for the student most importantly because they put so much work in and missed the mark. Okay, so this is my assignment that I've done, and there's the topic and all that. So I'll just read it through. Several possibilities. The cause of the patient's fever. Usually the fever is indicative of some sort of infective process that's taken place, which causes an increase in metabolism to try to kill the bacteria within the bloodstream. Usually bacteria cannot survive temperatures greater than that, which is what the body temperature elevates fever. So here I've put 2 sources. I've got Guyton and Hall and McCants. So the first one I'll actually take you to, which is this book here. It's an ebook that I have, and page 898. So going through, here it is, 898, and I've highlighted to make it easy to find. So in this one, I've actually added information rather than directly referring. I've gone, okay, this is what happens during a fever. That's the chapter of it. Here's the Fahrenheit and degrees. I've highlighted here febrile disease and height exercise. So this is the temperature range during which, and it says they've actually called it fever therapy as well. So I've used that information to say this is the temperature at which bugs will die, and then I've gone in here. This is the process of killing the bugs off. And it's actually killing the bugs off actually generates the heat rather than the heat killing the bugs. Kind of weird, but either way, that's the process that's used. So that's the format, the information that I've used, and I haven't used any of those technical terms because I've just tried to summarize. If I go back to my paper, bacteria cannot survive. Why is the patient febrile? So I've sort of gone into the process of killing the bugs, not the triggers in that sense, like the actual disease. So you can interpret the question to a certain extent, as long as you're answering it. Now McCants, and it's document page 498. Here's my McCants and Huether, that's my pathophysiology. My front page information. So there's the benefits of the fever. That's the paragraph that I've used. And also, once again, talks about lysosomal breakdown, etc. Raised body temperature kills many microorganisms, has adverse effects on the growth and replication. High body temperature also decreases zinc, iron, copper, etc. So once again, I've got general information and summarized it in the whole kills bugs off and bugs can't survive. So that's they're the 2 sources I've used to answer that question. Now, in these, you only get 250 to 500 words depending on the question, so you don't have much to play with. That's why I've gone, this one's a very succinct answer. That answer there is 60 words so far. Could have been a bit longer, I think in hindsight. I think I could have done a bit more on that one. But I've answered the question for that part. What are the different categories of cardiomyopathy? So I've got primary or secondary, depending on the origins. Heart muscle can be involved or other systemic multi-organ infective processes. So here's my citation here, McEwen, which is assessment of cardiomyopathy. So that's this one, BMJ. Love BMJs, they're really good. Now I put the first few pages as my thing. There's the year of the citation. I go right down to the bottom quickly. You get author information down here, way down, way down. So there's a peer review which you don't cite, but there's McEwen and Muir there. So they're the ones that you cite. Name of the article is up here. And so I'll go through the answer. So basically, summary is a really good place to find information for BMJ. They have a lot of, as the summary word suggests, information. There's your primary, and there's your secondary. It describes heart muscle predominantly, and then systemic multi-organ disorder. I've actually used the similar phrases, but it's not a quote. It's a phrase that I've used. So, but I've given the credit to these guys for having come up with these two categories and those phrases. Systemic or multi-organ disorder. Just check that. So I've actually gone systemic multi-organ infective process. So I've actually changed it a little bit. So it's not a direct, verbatim type thing. Again, will be key phrase and terms that you can't avoid using because that's why we're referring to them, or that's the topic that we're talking about.
So you could have said it kind of on the primary or whatever, and just stated there and put it say inverted commas as a quote.
To use their exact, I could have to show my reading, my assessor that I was doing a little bit of thinking. Quoting's fine. It's been said to me, put it in the presentation. If you can't find a better way to say it, quote. Some things are just so superbly written and phrased, and it's so eloquent. You think there's no way I could top that. And it's not about beating the other guy or saying it better than them, but it's about saying it in such a way that meets in with what you're saying. And sometimes the quote is just perfect, and you can't. It's even sometimes wrong to change it because it's beautiful. So you just put it in, and it's quote. That's fine. So once again, within these classifications, I've gone further. There are three general categories of cardiomyopathy, namely dilated, hypertrophic, and restrictive. Now, don't be fooled into going into too deep. What are the different categories? So I've gone through the categories and classifications within categories. You don't need to get any more information because once we go to these references here, back down to McCants, into the next section. Sorry, it's a bit slow with the cables. Here's my chapters. There's dilated cardiomyopathy, congestive. Shows you a picture of the heart shapes. Actual photo. There's some different effects of the dilated hypertrophic restrictive. Nice table of data. It's very good information in there. I don't need all of it though, do I? Here I've got more information here, which I can read through and get specific key terms which I've used. And up here I've got another hypertrophic category, which talks about specific details and characteristics and qualities compared to the other two. So what I've decided to do with this particular question, so restricted with my words of 250 max. I felt, for me, that was the biggest limiting factor. I've gone, each has its own set of characteristics based on ventricular size along with distinguishable clinical signs, symptoms, and manifestations. So I've summarized those 3 pages of textbook with that one because they all have their own looks, they smell different, they sound different, they are in those classifications. So I've described the categories of cardiomyopathy and I've actually gone into the breakdown of classification. It was so hard not to talk about each one. This is restrictive. This is hypertrophy. This is dilated. But then I've the words before I even get to answering the question fully. So I thought I need to cut out all of that and just answer the question. That I was frustrated by the limitation of words. I've got to say, so many times I went over. This was early. This is module 4, so I done 2 and 3. It wasn't too bad. And by this time, I was getting a lot of my assignments blew out after this. I thought, stuff it. I'm just going to answer the question to my satisfaction because I felt very limited. And here I've got Neiman. So I'll go back to Neiman, which is another PDF document. So this is, you'll probably recognize this from Tintinelli. The layout. Cardiomyopathies supports the first one. Down here, I've got clinical features. I've just highlighted the heading, the subheading, because if you want to read it, there it is. I wasn't told what are the clinical features. I would just ask, well, what are the classifications? There's the restrictive, and there's further down my, it goes to the pericardial. So that is a second source to support that one statement, and that's listed once again as a dual citation, separated by a semicolon in alphabetical order. So this question was answered in about 80 words, 85 words or so. Once again, could have been longer, wanted to go more, but I felt trapped. Okay. State justified provisional and divisional diagnosis for this patient. So first, the patient is presenting with the classic signs and symptoms of APO. So I've gone acute cardiogenic pulmonary edema, APO. Of course, APO itself. So I've been able to use the acronym a second time without going verbose, pretty much. The APO must be the underlying cause of this presentation, and this is what requires definitive care at hospital. Hypertensive acute heart failure or high output cardiac failure should be suspected as primary cause. So now I've got Peacock as my citation for that one. So you go to this source, once again, it's Tintinelli. It has its own entry because it's its own chapter within the book. So you have Peacock as one entry, and then Neiman as another entry, and then as another entry if there's 3 chapters within Tintinelli. So there's my congestive heart failure chapter. Someone down here, I think I've highlighted. Yep. So there's symptoms of hypertensive heart failure, and that this matches the description given in the case page. So that's what likened. So I've used this information and synthesized, saying, boom. I haven't said that hypertensive heart failure has this, 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 and this, because I could have, but it would. To me, I felt it was too much. I wanted to summarize this by saying presenting with the classic signs and symptoms of acute cardiogenic pulmonary edema, secondary cause of this, the primary cause. I actually said he has a highlight key of that, but I didn't. Maybe it's further down. I've also gone, cardiomyopathy is a strong contender as a differential diagnosis as the patient falls into the classic age category and demographic, and also could be subject to sudden cardiac death if the clinical conditions are right. Both of these could be secondary to myocarditis, whose most common associated signs and symptoms, here we go, include, and I've got a quote, dyspnea, chest discomfort, palpitations, and syncope, all of which bacterial or infection is a precursor, and hence the fever history of having been unwell. So this is all from McEwen. So if we go to that, assessment of myocardiopathy, so it's this one. Somewhere in here, there will be that quote. Find it. Boom, there it is. So I've gotten word for word. I couldn't beat that with a description. It's an awesome, succinct list of everything, so I'll just copy it. But at your bottom dollar, Turnitin would find that in BMJ and go, look at that, copy, paste. And that's why I used the BMJ screen for that copy paste page earlier, because it's easy to do that. So simple. But I thought, okay, most common sign decisions include, boom, and then I've got, just to let them know, I've taken it directly, but I've integrated it into the sentence, and there's the direct quote with the citation at the end, because I didn't say McEwen said, I just said that this is it as a quote. So that's an example of a direct quotation integrated.
So you can at the end of that sentence, you don't have to put it straight after your comments.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
It's got the sentence going on with information.
yeah, you can do that. And I've got page 19 as well. I know why. Sudden cardiac death. Because I've included in that sentence that he's susceptible to sudden cardiac. So up here, I've got ECG stuff. Let's go up here. Oh, I might have put the wrong page number here. Cardiac death. Oh, page 19. I just can't read. So, sudden cardiac death can be a presenting sign. Okay. Dyspnea, lightheaded, that was all the description in the case given. So I thought, well, he's susceptible. And so what I've done is I've said, this is his clinical potential diagnosis, but this is what also could happen. So you sort of lead on to go, oh, this is concerning. You don't have to go all about cardiac death to what the question is. Introduct state justified provisional differentials. That's what they want. So that's what I've done. And this last one's a bit weak, I've got to say, but it's possible. So I thought, oh, I'll chuck it in. It's extra information I come across. Not this one, but the last one. So infective endocarditis cannot be ruled out, as fevers present in greater than 90% of cases, and dyspnea presents in 40% of such, both of which the patient has. So there's Rothman, Yang, and Marco, and I'll find that here in Rothman. Once again, it's Tintinelli, so it gets its own reference in inclusion. Okay, that's part of infective endocarditis. And down here, I've highlighted that we will give in the case. Fever, chills 40, weakness 40, just 90%. And that's symptoms, signs. His symptoms are what he's experiencing. Signs are just clinical information. Anyway. So that's the information I've used to say this is what I think it's got as a differential diagnosis. And this is the weak one I think I could have done better with, but you come up with different ideas. I said pericarditis. So I said a differential diagnosis of pericarditis relies largely on ECG findings. So since the specific patterns of his ECG rhythm are not mentioned in the case, they cannot be excluded until due consideration. Usually global ST elevation is found with pericarditis, but why did I include that at all? Because in Wu, which is pericarditis, I found some information. Which page number did I say it was? And risk factors. So these risk factors, case in matched a few of these things. Bit weak, I think, a bit directly. How many times do you take a patient and you go, oh, he's definitely got this, and then the next day you go, oh yeah, that. I'm like, what? No way, no way. I never saw it coming. And this is the big bug. Well, because it's showing the assessor it's not necessarily given in the case study, but you need to consider it because it is actually a cardiac condition that we're writing about. once again, most people would not have chucked in pericarditis because in hindsight, I think he had all the wrong signs and symptoms from what we experienced. There was no positional chest pain, no chest pain at all. It was discomfort or, other descriptors. But I thought, hey, it won't hurt to consider that. Um, that's why I wrote. I didn't say I think he has. I said it's got it's possible, but you need to look further. Um, that was my answer to this question, and this part here was a total of that's two words itself. So maybe I saved the bulk for that answer because I thought there's quite a few different possibilities. So once again, if you go over, it doesn't matter too much. But if you answer the question properly to markers satisfaction, and you shouldn't go wrong unless they go, no, this is totally wrong. But then if you've supported your answer with, how can they dispute that? So once again, the referencing is your friend. It's a tool that just strengthens your argument. Just like that paper that the lady didn't like, she couldn't mark me down because I'd supported it. So it was kosher. So that brings us to the end of this particular. Um, I had a lot of fun putting it together. Just it helped to strengthen my knowledge, and just talk with a few guys out who with all the same, like all the same concepts. So you're not alone for sure. And it's just there was a huge gap where people, yeah, literally hadn't done anything for 20 years, and how it has changed in 20 years. The technology that we use to produce these assignments alone has changed so much. And then the referencing, like when it was at uni, it was all Harvard, Harvard this, Harvard's the bomb. So I came back into my studies, I don't know, 15 years later, going, yeah, Harvard, like, what's an APA? I had to totally throw everything on went out the window so I could do this new APA. So I don't know what's coming. Hopefully, it won't be much more because it takes the world this long to get around the system. And it's not hard. It's just knowing what to do. But when you compare them to each other, that's where that's where the tools come in with the referencing tools at Word. So yeah, hope you got something out of that. No.